we're going to start out with how to make text with rhinestones. There are programs out there that can simplify making rhinestone text, but I'm going to show you how to do it by hand within the CorelDRAW program with some easy features within Corel on how to make rhinestone templates in general, but we're going to start out with text primarily. If you were to buy a rhinestone font, it'd pretty much be already set up for you to fit rhinestones in it. So this is if you don't have any of those fonts or you don't have a program to simplify making templates or designs with rhinestones. So we're going to use CorelDRAW, and I'm using X5, which is the latest version out right now. But all of the steps are pretty much similar throughout the other versions of Corel. I just happen to be using the latest version that's out right now. So whenever you're creating something with rhinestones, you have to take into factor the width of the rhinestone itself, and you want to choose something to start out with that's thicker and bolder, so you kind of have to think outside the box when you're creating a design. So I'm going to start with just a basic font. We're going to do the word sparkle because that's what rhinestones do, and we're going to make it pretty big so we can see on screen. And I'm going to change the font to something real bold. I'm going to change the size. Okay, so say the customer wanted like a 3x10 word sparkle and they wanted it in rhinestones. There's a few different ways to go about it. You could make the word sparkle with an outline of stones, or you could do a fill of stones. So first I'm going to show you how to just do an outline of stones. I'm going to show you a quick way to do it and then a more complicated way to do it, so you can decide whatever works best for the design that you're working on. So first I need to view this in wireframe because the fill color is throwing me off, and instead of changing it, I'm just going to change my view method to wireframe at the top of Corel. So I'm really only seeing the vector line or the path of the line that's creating this design. So now I need to start making my holes or my circles for my stones. Well, how big are my stones? It's very important to know what type of stone you're working with, like the size of it, so you can create the actual template correctly. If you are off of the stone size, then your stones won't fall into place properly, and by the time it comes to putting the stones in there, you'd have already wasted a lot of production time if you didn't know this ahead of time. So wherever you get your stones from, they should be able to tell you or guide you in the right direction of which stone size you should create within your graphic design itself, the template you're making. And here it will tell me not only how to heat apply them, but towards the bottom it tells me cutting specs, like how much force I need to use, as well as my rhinestones or rhine stud size. So if I'm buying a 3mm stone, as you can see, my hole size is not 3mm exactly. You need a little bit of leeway for the stone to fall into place, plus be facing the right way. So the actual hole size that you would make for the template is 3.3mm. Or for rhinestones, if you're buying a stone size of 16, it's going to tell you that the hole size that you need to make in your graphic art program is 4.3mm. So I'm just going to say we're using a 3mm rhine stud. So I know that 3.3 is the stone size or hole size that I need to make. So back to Corel. I have my circle selected, a perfect circle here, and I have right now my Corel set to inches, my unit of measurement to inches, and I don't want to keep converting back and forth from inches to millimeters, so I'm just going to type in 3.3 mm and hit enter on my keyboard, and it will, as long as my proportionate lock is, my lock ratio is turned on, I should be able to just type that in and just hit enter, and it will pop it to be exactly, it'll convert it for me. So now I have my 3.3mm circle on my screen. I need to make a duplicate of that, so I'm just going to click my mouse and drag it and then right click my mouse. So if you select something or select an object like the circle with your mouse, left click, just a regular good old left click, and then drag it somewhere on your screen, you see like a duplicate just kind of floating out there in space. And then if you right click your mouse, then it's a little trick and it will just automatically make a duplicate, so you don't have to keep going to copy and paste or control C Control V. It's just a quick way to make a duplicate without having to use those other shortcuts and really not having to press any other buttons besides your mouse. So if I wanted to make several duplicates, just left click my mouse, drag, and right click my mouse, and it makes another duplicate. But really I only need 2 of these, so I'm just going to delete 2 of these to get them off our screen so we're not distracted. And I select my first circle, and then I need to turn on my blend tool. So here on the left, I'm over my blend tool. I just click on that. I select the first circle and drag it to the next circle, and it kind of pops into place, and what it does is it makes a blend, or several circles from the first original to the next one that I selected. Several, they blend together. So now I want to go over to the top where it says Path Properties, and if I hit the little corner triangle down arrow, it'll give me some options, and I want to say I want a new path. And then I have to point out what I want a new path to, and I want this path to go to the sparkle here, which is this word, the word that I typed down on my screen. Well, as you can see, it put it on the path of the S, but they're still kind of all bunched together. So what do I want it to do? I want to go to my More Blend options and hit the down arrow, the little triangle, to have more options, and I want to blend it along the full path. And it's going to take however many blends it could fit between one destination to the other that I dragged it from, and it's going to spread it out amongst the whole entire path. And I can manipulate the amount of blended objects in this box here, where it says 20 right now is the amount of circles that were originally in my blend path. I can change it to like 500. I can change it to 50, whatever. So, but primarily you want just a little bit of distance between the stones themselves. You don't want too much distance between the stones. If you do, then the actual little lip that the blade, when it's cutting through the stencil material that we carry is 15 mil thick. It's thicker than vinyl, obviously. It needs to be, because it needs to be wide enough to hold those stones. But primarily, if you cut the circles too far apart or too close together, when you're going to brush those stones on top of those holes to fall into place, they're going to get caught on the lip of the circle that it cut itself. So it's going to be either, more production time. So you kind of just want a little bit less than the actual width of the circle itself. So you can, play around with the total amount by increasing or decreasing the amount of objects that are blending on a path. So as you can see, here we have a lot of, circles on a path, and we could get rid of this original line and be done with it. But focusing on some of these designs, you'll see that some of these circles are actually overlapping each other. And it's not really going to work out. It's not like, said and done as quick as what I showed you. So there are some things that you may not be able to get away with by just simply putting stones on a blended path, especially with text, when you have sharp corners and things like that. So what's another way to produce a text with rhinestones if you don't actually have a rhinestone font? So I'm going to start out with a new page, and then we're gonna go to the next method, which involves breaking up the actual font to segments, and then actually creating these stones onto a path of each segment, and that kind of gives you more control over where the stones are going to be placed. So I'm just going to make a new page. Okay, so now I have a font that not only is it a script font, but it has thick and thinner points, so it's a little bit more challenging than that Arial black that I had demonstrated before, that still had stones overlapping each other and still would have needed some manipulation. So the first thing I want to do is get rid of my fill color. So I'm just going to view it in wireframe, and whenever you're working with a script font, you'll see that the lowercase letters, they overlap, so you have to weld everything first together, which is arrange, shaping, and weld. And you'll see that now everything is connected. So if I were to just create a 3.3 millimeter circle on a path for something like this, then it's not going to, I already know that things are not going to overlap in the corners correctly. It's not going to be as pretty as I wanted it to be. So the first thing I need to do, and because I welded everything together, you'll see that my status on my Corel has changed from a true type font or artistic text to now a curve. So now it's considered an object. So it's uneditable. I can't go back into my text tool and say I want this to say, you know, Prince instead of Princess now. So you pretty much want to make sure that your spelling's correct, your font's chosen before you weld everything, because now it's considered an object. And because it is an object, I can break it all up. So I'm going to go to Arrange, and I'm going to break everything up. So break curve apart means I'm separating each part of this, the inner cavities from the outer cavities. So I just got rid of the fill color. Instead of viewing in wireframe, I'm viewing in normal view, and I'm just right-clicking on my mouse on my color palette to show you that you know, these are all different objects now. I'm going to assign them different colors just to show. Even the dot of the I is considered its own object. But even if I were to create a stone on this path, I'm still going to have problems, especially on the corners here. I'll do that as a demonstration just to show my point. If I were to draw a circle and make it 3.3 millimeters to fit a 3mm stone, make a duplicate by left-clicking my mouse, dragging, right-clicking my mouse, going to my blend tool, clicking and dragging from one circle to the other, telling my path properties that I want it to go on this new path, and I want it to go along the entire full path. I may get lucky depending on how many stones I have in there, and everything will fit in the corners nice and snug. But as you can see, no, like this corner at the top left of my inner cavity of the P, it's not in the corner where I want it to be, plus it's kind of overlapping in this area here. And things may need to be manipulated to accommodate your rhinestone, so you may have to actually start editing your design to do that. So I don't want to go that route, so I'm just going to undo that. And we're going to break this up even more. So how do I break up this object? Because it is just a whole object even more. Well, you do it node by node. So with my shape tool, I'm going to select the corner node of the inner cavity of my P, and then I'm going to go over to my node editing tools and break the curve. So I'm going to break apart that link, that chain that linked those two nodes together. And I'm going to do the same with this corner node. I'm going to click on the corner node and I'm going to break it apart. And then I'm going to go to Arrange, and I'm going to break the curve apart even more. So because I broke the link in the chain, those two nodes that linked, you know, this line, this green line from this blue line, now they are even their own object. So I've even broken up even more. And I can even manipulate this inner part of the P to be maybe a little bit wider, or I can get rid of it altogether, depending on, you know, what you're trying to, how significant it is to your design. I just know it's going to look like a mess because those rhinestones are going to be way too close, but this is a characteristic of the font and maybe actually part of the logo you can't get rid of, you know, because it's a copyrighted logo, whatever it is. You may have to manipulate it just a bit to accommodate a stone or the path of a stone. So that's broken up even more. So now let's see what happens when I take my blend and I tell it to go along this path, this new path, which now only consists of just this blue part of this line here. And I tell it to blend along the full path. You know, it looks a little bit better. You'll notice that I always have a stone at my corner points, which is, you know, a bonus for me because that's what I want it to look like. And I can manipulate the amount of stones on just that path to accommodate, you know, the distance between each stone. A stone falls nicely in corner of each path. I think this looks a lot more cleaner than what it did when it just originally went along the entire path of the inner cavity of the P. So now I have to kind of do the same for this outer line of the P. And as you can see, this method is a little bit more tedious because you have to break everything up and treat everything as its own, but the results are a lot better. So I'm just going to do the same method. I'm going to draw a circle. I'm going to make that circle 3.3 millimeters. Select the circle, left click it, drag it, right click. Go to my blend tool, click and drag from one to the other. Tell my path properties I want a new path and I want it to be this green line now. And I want it to blend along the entire green line. And then I want to maybe manipulate the amount of stones I have. I'm going to say 35. That's a lot. Let's try 30. Okay. Now, because you had two lines that were kind of connecting into each other, I'm just going to pop one of these up a little bit just to break it up, and you'll see that at the end of each line there always will be a duplicate, because it's always going to make sure that there's that circle along the entire path, and the starting point of that path is the end of that line. But those lines touch, so eventually a circle is going to overlap. So if you're cutting a template, it will cut twice in that area. So I do recommend that you end up breaking away all of these. Eventually, when you're done creating all of your circles along all of, you know, your paths or your lines, your segments of the object that you broke up, you break the blend apart, which will break the circle away from your line, so you can eventually delete that line. But you can also delete that one corner circle too, and delete this one as well. But you want to avoid having duplicate circles on top of each other, because it's just going to cause your blade to cut twice in that area. And now you can bring this back down. And it looks much more uniform, like it's meant to be within that path. So now we're just going to do a quick one on, because now we have this script, and this script, you know, contains a lot of curves within the entire design. What kind of manipulations do we have to do on something like this? Well, first I'm going to figure out some corner nodes. I know for sure that, you know, this area is a starting point for the line on the top half of the word. So if I select that node and I break it apart, then I can do the same at the end of the word. Just select the node. I'm going to click on this corner node here and then have the option to break it apart. So now that I've done that, I can go to my arrange and break the curve apart, truly making this part of the cursive its own segment or object. So I just assign that to be blue to show you as an example. And you have some segments over here that are vertical, you know, that may, technically they should be probably broken up too, but we're going to take a chance here and we're going to see how these stones fall along the path of just this top part of the cursive line. So first I need to make my stone, and you know, maybe you changed your stone size up too. Maybe you have a different stone size that you need to make depending on what you're doing. You're using all different kinds of stones. Because you are custom making this template, you can mix and match stones. You know, you may not want to just stick with the 3mm stone. You may have to go smaller or larger in some areas, not only to give your design more characteristics, but just to fit in these really small, tiny crevices. I mean, we're working with a really big word right now. It's just an example. But, you know, you can imagine if you had a really small, thin segment, you may have to, you know, manually place a couple stones here and there and replace some of these circles that are on this blend path to try to manipulate the design so it flows nicely. So it really looks like a cursive word. So I just made a duplicate. I left clicked on it and then dragged and right clicked. Go into my blend tool. And I'm just kind of repeating all the steps that I've made, except I'm telling it to blend along this new path I made. And then I'm going to tell it to go along the entire path. And then I'm going to fill it up. I think it looks a lot cleaner. So you're basically just breaking up, you know, segments. Here you may have 3 segments that you need to break up. As an example. So you could select the node on this corner, break it up, on this corner, break it up, and this corner, break it up. Go to Arrange, break curve apart. Now technically you should have 3 separate parts. You have this side of the cavity, you have this one. I'm just choosing different colors just to show. So you have brown, this black. I'm going to change it to be a brighter color so you can see it. And you would just put circles on a path for each segment, and then if there's any duplicating circles that are in the corner of each segment, you would just pick one of them and delete it. So everything kind of flows nice together. Here we have something overlapping, which is kind of a good example that you may have to manipulate in this area. So you kind of want to, you know, skim through everything and make sure that there's nothing overlapping, because this wouldn't work right, especially if you weeded it. So the first thing we have to do is select the line so we can break the blend away from the line. So we go to Range and break blend apart. And then we select the circle, and you want to ungroup them. So now I can choose just one circle. So I could technically delete one of these and I could just put it here, because remember, you're getting rid of this line here, so you're really just using it as kind of like a map.